This is our fortress, Europe's last line of defense against tyranny, this cathedral of law, a strong tower protecting a new generation from aggressive radicals. But the enemy is not at the gate. The enemy of our freedom lurks in the shadows of the law, hidden by process, dressed in populism.
The European Union was founded on the ruins of the Second World War and the mass slaughtering of human beings on European soil. But now, what we are seeing in countries such as Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, of course, and now recently in Denmark, how we treat people that are fleeing war and persecution in third countries. If somebody would have mentioned it to me some years ago, I would have said that will never happen.
For me, it's clear that we are now pushing the limits for what is acceptable. And first it's one country and people react. Then it's another country and people react a little bit less. So I think it's very worrying, the kind of development we see.
Today, Poland, Hungary, Denmark, Spain, Slovakia have served up a depressing basket of constitutional sins, some in the letter, some in the spirit of the law.
The German army rolled across the neutral borders of little Denmark, and in a matter of hours it occupied the entire country. By nightfall, Denmark is erased as a nation, and the Danes go into slavery.
In 1940, H.G. Wells wrote this book, The Rights of Man, partly in response to the ongoing war with Germany. It was instrumental in the creation of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights and the European Convention of Human Rights. In The Rights of Man, Wells sets out a legal framework designed to oppose tyranny and offer a standard for all peaceable citizens. He writes, "The destruction of confidence is one of the less clearly recognized evils of the present phase of world disintegration."
We are going from one crisis to another for several years, and we are lacking the confidence of our voters and citizens how efficient we are in solving this crisis.
Democracy and rule of law are like a garden that you have to attend and take care of constantly. If you don't, it will go astray and grow all kinds of things you don't want it to grow.
Do you see the rule of law being gradually diminished within Europe at the moment?
I think the problem is not that it is necessarily reducing or decreasing. The problem is how we are perceiving the situation that is taking place. And more worrying than that is how the people, how the citizens will perceive it. Once the citizens perceive their governments as turning more authoritarian or as wanting to decrease their personal liberty, then we will start having serious problems.
Just as the global economic crisis was caused not by a lack of money, but a lack of confidence in money supply, so too today there is a crisis of confidence in our laws and our governments. There is no shortage of law, good and bad. There is no lack of government in Europe. The crisis is one of eroded trust and compromised values.
If we don't take this seriously, if we don't manage to break this vicious circle now, we are running the risk of seeing the Schengen area fall apart and in the long run risking the whole union as a political project.
At the end of December, the Polish Senate adopted the small media law concerning the management and supervisory boards of the Polish public television broadcaster, TVP, and public radio broadcaster, PR. The new law changed the rules of appointment for the management and supervisory boards of the public service broadcasters, putting them under the control of the Treasury Minister rather than an independent body. In October, ahead of general elections in the lower chamber of the Polish Parliament, the outgoing legislature nominated 5 persons to be appointed as judges by the President of the Republic. When the new Parliament was elected, they overturned these appointments. Now the European Commission wants to complete what it calls a constructive and facts-based dialogue with Poland to prevent the emergence of a systematic threat to the rule of law.
The problem is that we don't have really very strong mechanisms, I would say, if we look at the institutional side, the European Commission, when we were discussing the media law in Hungary or when we are discussing the recent situation in Poland with a new, very, I would say, bad law on public broadcasters or the rule of law on constitutional court. What are the mechanisms the European Commission can use?
In March 2014, the European Commission adopted a new framework for addressing systemic threats to the rule of law in any of the EU's member states. The framework allows the Commission to enter into a dialogue with the member state concerned to prevent the escalation of systemic threats to the rule of law. The purpose of the framework is to enable the Commission to find a solution with the member state concerned in order to prevent the emergence of a systemic threat to the rule of law that could develop into a clear risk of a serious breach, which could potentially trigger the use of the Article 7 procedure.
It is very nice to see the European Commission take the first step. But let's also take the second step, and let's not shy away again from this issue in Hungary that has not been solved. So after this rule of law mechanism, let's go on and propose an Article 7 which is eventually taking away voting rights of a member state if they do not adhere to the Copenhagen criteria.
In January, the Commission sent a letter to the Polish government to start structured dialogue on the rule of law framework. The College of Commissioners agreed to come back to the matter by mid-March in close cooperation with the Venice Commission.
Is this a moment for President Juncker to speak up in the spirit and interest of European values?
It certainly is, and I believe that Juncker's Commission is actually doing that. If you see the speeches of Vice President Timmermans, I think he is really interpreting and applying the spirit of human rights really well. And I think that our citizens are also receiving his message and receiving the Juncker Commission's message. They too are perceiving that the European Commission and the European Parliament are seeking to protect them from a decrease or a limitation on their freedoms.
Today we have decided that the Commission will carry out a preliminary assessment on this matter under the rule of law framework. We are taking this step in light of the information currently available to us, in particular the fact that binding rulings of the Constitutional Tribunal are currently not respected, which I believe is a serious matter in any rule of law dominated state.
If you break the fundament and the fundamental principles, then you are running the risk of deteriorating the whole project. If the foundation is not there, the whole construction on top will fall apart.
Just as economic factors led to the rise of fascism in the 1930s, it could be market forces demanding transparency and stable political systems for investment, which purge imprudence from political discussion.
How do the markets feel about this change in democratic style?
Well, that's the interesting part. Standard & Poor's has just recently lowered their rating of Poland from A- to BBB+ or something like that, with a negative outlook, because they say rule of law is being challenged. It's a difficult situation in Poland, and therefore climate for investors is not good.
The economic answers, they are there, but you need political maturity to put them in place. And we haven't had that. We had a certain maturity in most member states for center-right governments, but it has been too slow.
Do you think that business, the markets, have a role to play in providing a new structure for Europe?
Certainly, the healthy economy is the key to many solutions. We still have in Europe a high unemployment, a high rate of poverty, and these are the basic values of Europeans: safety, jobs, and some security.
If today someone does not comply, a member state does not comply with the rules concerning the Eurozone, the banking union, everything that has to do with the economy, no one is questioning that this would lead to sanctions. But if you break the whole fundament, nothing happens.
In general, we are proper democracies, but we need to keep each other sharp and tell each other the truth among friends.
When it comes to Denmark, I think that they are opening some of the floodgates to a past in Europe, our past, that is so grim and so violent, that we should be saying stop right away.
Spanish laws infringing press freedom, Danish confiscation of migrants' personal items, Hungarian aggression against media freedom and migrants fleeing war have challenged our sense of what it means to be European, sometimes breaking Europe's de facto constitutional law, often trampling on the spirit of the law. Populism has soared, in part because of poor political and economic management within Europe, but also because of a failure to defend this fortress. Europe's ancient enemy, tyranny, is within. And as Wells said, it is the destruction of confidence which will bring down our walls.
What I fear is that we lack strong leadership in Europe, and that's why we are running from one crisis to another, and we start losing what is our long perspective goal, what are our values. We are actually going away from these values.
It will take the wisdom of Solomon to ensure that this youthful European Union is not destroyed by selfishness and anger.